In today's video, I'm going to give you a few tips on how to write a winning offer in today's real estate market. Stay tuned. The first thing I recommend is to reach out to the other agent. You can find out if there's any competing offers, what kind of terms might make it appealing to the seller to accept your buyer's offer, and just to establish some rapport. So many agents don't reach out to the agent at all, or they send a text or maybe an email. So pick up the phone, dial, and reach out to the other agent, introduce yourself, and develop a professional relationship. I think that goes a really long way in getting your offer accepted. You might even get some clues or some tips that give you the ability to go back to your client and give an upper hand. I look at it as an opportunity to do some recon on the offer and on the sale and see what type of information and intelligence you could bring back to your offer to improve your offer on your final submission. The second thing I recommend is giving proper feedback to your client. So after you've reached out to the other agent and you've gathered some intelligence and gotten some information that might be helpful to craft your offer, go back to your client, share the helpful information, and see what you can do and what changes they might be willing to make to improve their offer. Maybe it's a closing date, maybe it's a certain contingency, or maybe there's something they mentioned that your client could use when negotiating, or maybe they're going to write a letter. So that brings me to number 3, which is writing a letter to the seller. Now, one thing you could suggest, although you have to be very careful not to break any fair housing rules or do anything that could be construed as violating protected classes or anything like that, but you could have your buyer write a letter to the seller, just explaining why they love the house, maybe identifying something personal that they picked up in the house or caught onto while they were touring the home. Maybe they like something about the neighborhood or have some family tie to the neighborhood, so they can mention something like that. And then as an agent, you can use that when you're presenting your offer. The fourth thing I'm going to mention, and very, very important, is to consider some contingencies that you as a buyer or as a buyer's agent might be able to advise your buyer to maybe consider waiving or minimizing. Now, what I mean by that is you can offer a waiver of appraisal, for example, where the buyer could cover, an instance where the house doesn't appraise or it underappraises. However, one thing you can do to protect yourself is offer a gap negotiation where you'll cover up to a certain amount in an appraisal gap, all right? Otherwise, it would be up for negotiation, just like any other underappraisal. Another thing you could do is consider a partial or waiver of full inspections. I don't really think you should advise your client to waive their inspections. I think even if you're taking a house as is, you're still entitled to home inspections, and you should do those home inspections. This is a huge purchase, probably one of the biggest purchases of your client's life or of your life, and it's really important to know what you're buying, all right? When you're buying the house as is, generally, that means you're not going to request repairs, and that's where I said you can kind of partially waive your inspection, where you'll say, we're not going to inspect for cosmetic issues or deficiencies. We're only going to inspect for structural, environmental, or systematic issues, such as the HVAC, things like that. All right, you might scan for an oil tank just to make sure there's no buried environmental hazards such as that. So those are the type of home inspection contingencies you might want to consider modifying in your contract. And you can do that on the initial offer. Sometimes in our state, New Jersey, attorneys weigh in and they may change some of the language as well. It's really important to explain to your client what that actually means. So if you're out looking at a home, you write an offer, it gets accepted. They offer to take the home as is. They're doing home inspections. They find out maybe there's a crack in, the kitchen countertop that's Formica, or maybe there's a loose toilet bowl or a loose pipe, or maybe even a leaky faucet. Those types of things, seller may not have to repair, even if a buyer feels, they're paying top dollar, but you have to remind them they waived those inspections. So you have to go back to what did they actually waive and what are they entitled to ask for. Even in an as-is inspection, you could always ask for anything you want, but the seller has no obligation to do those things. Another thing you could do is offer a flexible closing date. That's very common, just to, just be open, especially if you have nothing to sell or your client has nothing to sell. It's really easy to offer a flexible closing date, and I think that's something you should always be offering in this competitive market. Another thing you can do is offer a LEASE-BACK or a use in occupancy, which basically helps address the concern that your seller will have no place to go once they sold their house. So in this case, this basically allows the buyer to buy the house, close on the house. The seller gets their funds deposited into their account. Maybe they're in a situation they could benefit from paying off some debts, and just gives them a little more time to get into a lease or to get into their next home or whatever they might be doing next. All right, it's not indefinite. I would think 0 to 60 days. You might be able to get something a little longer than that, maybe 90 days, maybe 6 months, but I wouldn't necessarily count on it being an indefinite thing. And again, the client needs to be educated on exactly what that might look like on both sides, the seller and the buyer. The final tip I'm going to give today is just presenting your offer properly or in a very professional manner to the other agent. So as a buyer's agent, I think professional presentation is very important. And what I mean by that is put your documents in a certain order, the order you'd like to see them. So consider something like maybe you have the letter, followed by the pre-approval letter, followed by the actual offer, followed by all the addendums, lead paint, seller's disclosure, things like that, right? So when a seller sees that, the first thing they see is that letter. They see the pre-approval of funds. Ideally, it's from a local, reputable, preferred lender, not some fly-by-night lender they found online or something like that. So again, I think the presentation helps, and I think it can go a long way in getting your offer accepted and standing out from some of the other offers. A bonus tip today is that you can use an escalation clause. For those of you who don't really know what an escalation clause is, it's where you might offer, let's say the house is, you're going to offer $500,000, but the house you'd really pay up to $520,000, but you really don't want to because you just feel like you're bidding against yourself. You feel like $500,000 is enough, but you know, this crazy market, crazy things happen. So basically you can write an escalation clause. Again, the house is $500,000. You can write the offer up to 520 or 600 or whatever amount you want. And basically you're going to say that it's $1,000 or 2,500 over the next highest offer up to the offer amount you're prepared to make. So you make your highest and best offer at 500,000. Well, you have a contingency up to 550, which goes 1,000 over the next highest offer. So they receive another offer for 520 that has no escalation clause or escalates up to 520. You have your offer escalating to 550, but the next highest offer is only 520. So you've agreed to pay 1,000 or 2,500 or whatever the amount might be in your offer or your escalation clause. So your competing offer is 520. You come in at, let's just say 522.5, 2,500 over that 520 offer. Even though your escalation clause goes all the way up to 550, you only have to execute it at 522.5 based on the terms of both of those competing offers. All right, so that's in a nutshell what an escalation clause. And going back to my previous step, if you're using an escalation clause, I think it's fair to put that escalation clause maybe right before or right after the offer in that presentation I was just discussing earlier. A couple other quick, strong tips to help make your offer even stronger is, if possible, show that you're offering cash. Even if you think you might switch to a mortgage, you can still show, if you have the funds, that you have cash or a considerable amount of cash to put down as a down payment. You could always change things after reconsideration or speaking to your lender if you find a better or more agreeable term. In the end, the seller's still going to get the same amount of money in their pocket. But don't wait too long if you're going to do any changes, because of course you need addendums, approvals, and there's underwriting and appraisals and things have to happen. So you don't want to slow the deal up, because then it'll be on you for changing terms without telling anyone or without doing it in an expeditious manner. Finally, another tip right now in this crazy market is just to work with your strongest buyers. You know, work with those buyers who don't have contingencies, who have stronger down payments, cash buyers, and those buyers who are just prepared to go and responsive and ready to do all the tips that we just discussed in this video. For those of you who stayed this long, I have a super bonus tip for you. The super bonus tip is, when possible, you can offer a non-refundable cash deposit. Now that basically says no matter if you close or not, the seller's going to get that money. So let's just say you offer $2,500 non-refundable. So whether they backed out for inspection reasons or they backed out for any reason at all, the seller still walks with that money. Of course, if the buyer does close on the property, that non-refundable deposit would get applied to the sale price and deducted at closing. But otherwise, there's just an extra guarantee that this deal is definitely going to close. So whether that amounts $1,000, $2,500, or $5,000, I think that it's a secret weapon in this market. Not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of people are using it. And it could definitely help you win in this competitive market when going against so many other offers. I hope you stay tuned. I hope you love this video. I hope you learned how to write a competitive offer in today's market. And if I can help you in any way, please reach out to me anytime. Again, this is Brian Walsh with Brian Walsh Real Estate at EXP. Talk to you soon.